just really riveted to this Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, just because it is a rare view into a relationship that has familiar aspects to it that so many of us have experienced. And this whole playing out of this whole relationship goes to really make this very important point, and that is that childhood experiences have a very large impact on us, and they don't go away with time. They don't go away with success. They don't go away with fame. They don't go away with money. But away with repression, with pushing them down and trying to pretend to be okay, or even being okay, which Johnny Depp was for decades. More than okay. He had successful relationships. He had, all previous relationships, partners say he was a wonderful guy. Okay, so this is really the first person that came out in his 50s saying that he is this abuser. I don't think, in my opinion, she has not established that he is an abuser. I believe that she definitely is an abuser, which she would admit. But he is a substance abuser, that's for sure. And he uses alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism, clearly, and has done that throughout his life. I think that this relationship with Amber Heard probably exacerbated it, and she certainly used it as a vulnerability that she could exploit. And I think that's what's going on here. And, she is someone who will exploit vulnerabilities. And the other thing that she will do, a personality type like hers will do, is hone in on triggers. What I believe happened here with Johnny Depp is that throughout his life, so he had bunches of things that looked like he beat his childhood abuse. And he was abused by his mother, in really awful ways. He had an abusive mother and a very passive dad, and who didn't leave until he was 15, and then finally he left. She name called. She made fun of the weaknesses of her children. She was just a very abusive person, physically and emotionally. On all surface views, it looked like he had overcome all that. It looked like he went on to have good relationships. He was a good guy. He was successful in his life, etc. But lo and behold, here in his 50s, he gets an attraction, a powerful attraction. He chooses this woman who is younger. She is 22 years younger. But it's not that. That's not the attraction. There is something powerful that he doesn't even understand that is attracting him to her. Didn't have emotionally available parents. We get into one of the ways we deal with that is to become a nice guy, or become a good girl, where you just want to please people to get them to love you, to get them to earn your place in these relationships, because what you want more than anything is connection, and you want to love and be loved, and that's what you really, really want. And so you've learned that the best way to do that in your case is to have no needs, to have no boundaries. Also, what we do is we are emotionally attuned to other people's needs. We're emotionally attuned to other people's needs, and our lives can become about meeting other people's needs and repressing our own. And I see this very much in Johnny Depp. These are the seeds in the heart of codependency. These are the seeds in the heart of codependency. Narcissism and codependency are two different ways of dealing with childhood trauma. And we kind of just see that playing out here. We see that because Amber Heard was also abused in childhood, or at least she says so, and I guess we can go with what she said. It's really hard with her to believe anything she says, but apparently there's enough of a background or whatever to be able to believe that yes, she was somewhat abused or neglected in childhood, and that her parents were substance abusers, something like that. And so one way or the other, it wasn't an ideal childhood where she had this emotionally available, healthy upbringing. And she learned to deal with it by becoming aggressive, by becoming controlling, by becoming manipulative, and using her appearance, her sexuality, and all of that to manipulate people. And she is very powerful at it, because if you listen to this case, she has seduced a man who has more money and more power and more celebrity than she does by far. You know, it isn't like Johnny Depp is the one person. She seems to have interactions with both men and women where they become, you know, they become intimate with her, and in some cases, we know of two at least, where they became intimate enough to also then be abused by her. She was married before to a woman and she was arrested for domestic violence in that case. The whole case is about that Amber Heard made claims about Johnny Depp that he was an abuser, and she timed it just so that it came out right out with the release of Aquaman, which is her biggest role so far in her career, and also was really timed perfectly with the Me Too movement. So she became somewhat of a spokesperson for surviving domestic abuse. Seemed very ambitious about going about Johnny Depp, you know, pairing herself with someone more powerful and successful in her career, in that career than she was, and using that for help. But when the relationship was breaking up, she found this other way that she could become famous, she would become powerful, and that was through this story of how she was a survivor of domestic abuse, and not just by anyone, but by the beloved celebrity Johnny Depp. What this video really is about how nothing saves you but doing the healing work, because you would think that he would be immune. You would think that all these decades of success and separation from that abusive past would have healed him, and it didn't. And the thing about this whole thing is that there's a ton of recordings, audio recordings and even video recordings, which is very unusual in a case like this, because as most of us know, this abuse, you know, it happens in private. It happens in private in most all cases. Another thing with Amber Heard is it didn't always happen in private with her, because when you have someone that's that explosive, they will sometimes just do knee-jerk things. The first arrest happened because she slapped her wife across the face in the SeaTac airport and was then arrested. So, you know, that was not something that my ex would have done, that's for sure. She's been diagnosed now with borderline personality and histrionic personality, which I think is probably more suiting to her. You know, my ex was a narcissistic and antisocial personality diagnosis. Diagnoses, as we know, though, are very unusual. I was, you know, basically almost in the same way my ex had a diagnosis because of a dispute because of our divorce, and that's kind of why she also had this diagnosis, was because of what was going on in her relationship and the court case. So, you know, but most cases, people with cluster B personality disorders are not beating the door down to go get therapy because they are not in pain or they're not aware of their pain. Their victims are, though, that's for sure. The issue is we can heal from our childhood trauma, but it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away without doing the healing work. It just doesn't, and nothing saves us from it. And except for confronting it, admitting what was, admitting what happened, and validating our experience, and starting to believe ourselves, and starting to validate ourselves, and starting to draw boundaries and be okay with saying no and all of that kind of stuff. And it's very interesting to see that Johnny Depp, in all of his success, was still very much a people pleaser. He was being taken advantage of by countless people. He had, he was letting people live for free, and he was, doing all this stuff. And in some cases, it was him choosing to do it, where he just took a shine to someone and, invited them in because he believed in what they were doing or something like that. In that one case, it was an artist he discovered, and he gave him a place to stay and practice his art. That was one thing. But he also had bunches of people staying in his places he owned because they were friends of Amber's, and and just a lot of people taking advantage of him and thinking nothing of it. It's clear to see that he had a hard time saying no. So he got with someone who triggered all of his trauma, triggered all of his wounds, and what he would do is walk away and retreat into himself, where he would abuse his own body and beat himself up for having gotten in this situation. And how many of us have done that? So many things. How, after managing to overcome his childhood trauma by all appearances and do quite well in his life, raise 2 kids, blah, 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 end up in his 50s with this destructive relationship with a woman 22 years younger. And I think that the clear answer is, when watching his testimony, is that he never did heal those wounds. Those wounds were there, waiting to, waiting for the Amber Heard to come along and trigger and pinpoint them, trigger them, and hone right in on those needs. They were there. He was vulnerable, and all it needed to happen was for someone who exploits vulnerabilities to come along and attach themselves to him. And it is just really kind of eerie to watch. And for some of us who have been in a situation like that, you can just see it so clearly. So anyway, good luck to Johnny Depp. I'm on his side. I also believe that now he has identified what's wrong with her, I think he's starting to identify what he was doing wrong, how he became vulnerable to this, and I do think it's going to be healing to him, and I do think even in his career he's going to overcome it. I really do. I think that he's beloved and that doesn't go away, and that he will be able to come back from this. I really do. Alrighty, so what happened to my lip? Well, I was sitting on one of these chairs. That's the kind of chair. And a thunderstorm began. And my little dog, my little Maltese dog, is very scared of thunder. So what did I do? I went down and I sat on the place where your knees are supposed to go. And was holding my little dog. Well, that is not a stable thing to do. And I got kicked out. I leaned forward, got kicked out. My chair slipped, went out from under me, and I slammed my lip on my desk. And it started gushing blood, and it was really awful and painful. My lips rolled right up. And, this is something that kind of amazes me I've ever heard, too. It's like, I have accidents all the time where I can take more pictures just in this, consequences of my day than she ever had. It's funny. She must not be nearly as klutzy as I am. So anyways, I ended up getting a big fat lip, bloody lip, and so that's what you see here. And so I would say these chairs, these ergonomic chairs or whatever, I'm getting a new chair. That chair is not safe. Anyway, so that's what happened to me and my lip. Alright, thanks a lot for listening, you guys.